Soul Source is a podcast made by women for women. We're looking at the topics that are influencing women and the world they live in, and we're shedding a light on those topics. We're speaking with the national experts. We're bringing you the stories you're only going to hear here. Don't miss out on being in the know. Subscribe to Soul Source wherever you listen to podcasts today and leave us a review. This part's really important. That way we can continue to bring you the content you love each and every week. So buckle up, Soul Source Society, because we're about to get started.
Every time after every fourth turning or crisis cycle, we've come out better and stronger for all. But it doesn't come easily, Raquel. It's a time of breakdown, and then we enter that breakthrough.
Hello, everyone. I am Raquel Lamel, your host of Soul Source. And let's be honest, everyone seems to be divided on some level these days. Whether it's Biden versus Trump, iPhone versus Android, or even grape versus strawberry. It seems to be a very clear divide in the United States, and it seems resolution is not likely. Arguing is a part of life. In fact, it can even be healthy. It's not expected that people always have the same point of view or even agree on everything. But as humans, we should be able to listen to opposing points of view and at least consider them. We may still choose to disagree, but it's the act of allowing the other side to speak and giving them the respect to do so that seems to be lacking in our country today. My guest today is Jessica Stollings-Holder. You may remember her from way back when, I think it's episode 6 of Soul Source. That was almost a year ago, guys. In that episode, we were talking about how the different generations will be impacted by the pandemic that we're living in. And today, Jessica is joining me again, but this time we're discussing belonging and how to use our differences to bring us together versus tearing us apart. Not only will she give us tips on how to deal with differences, but she'll share some of the worst arguments that she has seen and how people were able to resolve them or not. I don't know. We're going to find out. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Jessica Stollings-Holder. Welcome back, Jessica.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to be back. Raquel, I've missed you. And I'm telling you, I'm sipping out of this little coffee mug this morning and really looking forward to our conversation. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So how have you been? We got to catch up first.
Girl, it has been a wild and a wonderful year. You know, so many blessings amid the challenges. And so it's been a year of shifting and changing. I'm like you, I got married right before the pandemic. I'm super grateful for that. Became a bonus mom of 2, moved to a new city. And just as I was about to plug in, the pandemic hit. So as a professional speaker, I would say that's an interesting career to have in a pandemic. So lots of shifting to virtual. And I tell you, I'm having a ton of fun with it, Raquel. There's amazing opportunity to deliver in meaningful ways. And in some ways, I find virtual to be a lot more interactive than in person, and a lot of creativity happening in the space. So I've had a lot of fun learning, becoming a family, trying new things, serving, and just grateful to be healthy and well and with you today. Now, what about you? I mean, girl, what a year.
It's been a crazy year between launching the podcast, getting married, getting pregnant and having a baby in a couple of months. Like I'm like you. We don't mess around.
I mean, we don't play, right? Why don't we do all of life's major milestone changes in a 2-month period?
Exactly.
But listen, I mean, look at us today, happy, smiling, just so many blessings all around, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing to complain about. That's for sure. So, I'm assuming you're watching the same national news that I am, as we all are. And there really is no denying that we are divided in the United States right now. Some feel we may never be able to reach a place of unity, although that's exactly what President Biden is calling for. Do you think as a nation, we can start to come together somehow? I know this is kind of what you're working on right now, is coming together and belonging. So what is your take on all that?
Oh, absolutely. I see great hope and encouragement. In fact, I feel like sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. I think this COVID era where we're seeing great division politically, tension, all of these things kind of ripping us apart. In large part, it's cracked the way that we've done things, and it's exposed a lot of the stuff happening underneath the surface. I believe that's how we can really begin to heal and come together. And I'm so excited about that. And I tell you, this is not only just a hopeful sentiment, it's one rooted in research and theory. The insights that I have studied for over, about 12 to 13 years now is a theory called generational theory. And at its root, Raquel, it talks about these repetitive cycles that happen, giving us a lens to look back and to lead and anticipate forward. And so, what the theory says is it's like, think of it like seasons, and we go through these different seasons of weather and we hit winter and then spring comes. And it's always a good news story. So, right now, we're in the end of a generational cycle. It's called a fourth turning, a crisis cycle. It's when this major catastrophic event comes in and it rips us apart at the seams. I mean, everything, the way we think, the way we form, norm, our systems, our processes, our relationships, and then we rebuild from the ground up. Now, in this time after a crisis comes a high. It's a time where we come together, we rebuild. And so, I want to read you just a quick quote that was written. This I'll tell you the year in just a minute. But in my work, we've been predicting that something would happen roughly around the year 2020, sometime between 2020 2025 ish, and really provide the breakdown that's going to happen before we break through. So let me read you this. It says, a sudden spark will catalyze a crisis mood. This time of trouble will bring seeds of rebirth. Americans will share a great regret about recent mistakes and a resolute new consensus about what to do. The very survival of the nation will seem to be at stake. Sometime before 2025, America will pass through a great gate in history, commiserate with the Revolution, the Civil War, and the twin emergencies of the Great Depression and World War II. The risk and the promise will be very high. Americans will also enter this period with a unique opportunity to achieve a new greatness as a people. That was written in USA Today in 1996. So the good news story is, it's not wild that every time after every fourth turning or crisis cycle, we've come out better and stronger for all, but it doesn't come easily, Raquel. It's a time of breakdown, and then we enter that breakthrough. So I believe it's not only possible, I believe we're perfectly positioned to do the work that we need to understand, reconcile, and come together to build something better and stronger.
That is so interesting. And to hear that is almost, what is that now? 3 decades, almost 2 decades?
Yeah. It's amazing. And when you look at the rhythms and cycles of history, I've been trumpeting for years. As you know, we've talked about this before. I always saying something's coming. Hold tight. This it's coming. And the Great Recession happened, and that's not it. It's going to be more epic. And so it's been interesting to kind of see that happen. What I missed but should have seen was that it would be a pandemic, because when you look back on history, even pandemics have cycles. I mean, there's some vagueness around when pandemics in the past have started and ended. But if you look back at the plague, the Spanish flu, cholera, they're almost on these 100-year rhythms. And so there's a lot we can see. There's great order around us if we have the eyes to see them, if we have the lens to see that these challenges could become our opportunities. And if we embrace these struggles and do the hard work now, we are going to reap benefits, positive benefits, for generations to come.
For sure. And I know you've been doing research, like you said, 12 years on this topic, and you've been specifically lately looking into belonging. More importantly, arguing how to resolve those arguments. What made you start researching that and teaching a course on that? Why did you decide to get into that specifically?
Yeah, so two things. One, I would say, is kind of let's look at kind of recency effect. I quickly realized in the pandemic, I'm a generational expert. It's what I've done my whole life. Well, when 2020 happened and all of the events and all of the divides and friction and tension, I realized I can help. The very same skills and mindset needed to bridge generational gap can be broadly applied across any type of difference of background, personality, style, all of these things. And so I realized I can help. So I want to share the processes that I've learned to bridge generational gaps to help our society today. My greater impacting is my calling. And I believe this is something that found me throughout my life and my life story. I mean, when I think back on childhood, I know very much what it feels like to not belong. I had a severe speech impediment, and I was in a special needs class for that. Oh, girl,
Wow,
I was.
you'd never know that now.
Well, a lot of work. And, I think that's the beauty of the struggle, is it can be so transformed into your greatest opportunity. If I would have known in that speech class where I was taken away from my other friends and put in that class that one day my first job would be a nationally syndicated news reporter on radio. I mean,
Hmm.
come on, so I want to encourage people that your struggle can become your strength. I was, oh gosh, I had a ton of freckles. I was very overweight. I remember one time walking into a dance class and the girls didn't know I was there. And they said, "Oh gosh, we hope we don't have Jessica on our dance team because she would make us look really bad." And I mean, even
Oh,
today, I'm 38 years old and my heart is beating because I know the pain of feeling like you don't belong. In middle school, oh gosh, I tried every sport, could not find one where I fit. And I know very well what it feels like to not belong. And so my goal, my calling, my work is all about letting people know they're valued, they have a place, that they belong. So I'm a champion of the underdogs. If I could be a chief cheerleader of Misfit Island, I'm gonna be on there with my pom poms. But I also want, beyond belonging, people who maybe feel a little different to know that that could be their greatest strength, and for us as a community to know the very things that make each one of us unique and special, that instead of causing friction or division, think of the beauty that could come if we were to put all of that together. So it's a mix of head and heart. But if I do anything in this life, I hope that it will be that I help people feel seen and known and that they have a place to belong.
I think you are definitely on a good track to making that happen, Jessica. And and the belonging piece, I mean, that can be a source of a lot of arguing, right? Like people not feeling like they belong and not feeling like they're seen or heard starts arguments. And that's kind of where we're at right now as a country. What's the worst argument that you have seen personally, and why do you consider it to be the worst one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to go back to you made a statement that is so profound. I believe at the root of a lot of our arguments is not feeling like we belong. And when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in fact, belonging comes before self-esteem. And so when I look in the workplace or think about society, we're getting that mixed up. It's almost as if we need to perform to belong, right? But when we get belonging right, all of these other things come out of it. So I want to leave a couple questions when we think about belonging for listeners today. The first is, have you ever felt like you didn't belong? And what were those dynamics and situations that made you feel like that? And how did that make you feel? And I mean, like my childhood story that I just shared, that those things, they're deep and they stay with us. So knowing what that feels like can help us create more empathy for those who don't belong. And so the other question is, have you ever had a time where you felt like you did belong? And what did that feel like? And what dynamics made that possible? And how did that make you feel? Right? And are you thinking of some in your own head as we go?
Ah, oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely times where you definitely feel like you fit in versus you're kind of the outcast, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how, as leaders, how can we then create cultures and environments where people can belong? So, would really encourage pondering on those questions, because often before change comes, we have to really experience that pain within ourselves, and pain can birth passion, and that passion can change the world. And so, when we look back to your question, I mean, there are so many I could pull from. One I'll share, Raquel, really touched me in watching it unfold. I kind of had an up close and personal situation. I was actually at a camp, believe it or not. I think it was in Wisconsin. It was a couple years ago, and
Okay.
it was a faith based camp, and there we had leaders across different ages and stages of life. And so there had been, I'd come in because there was a lot of tension and friction, particularly between the boomers and the millennials, and there were the two leaders. I mean, I'm telling you, they could not say a word and it not spark some kind of frustration. So I'm there to kind of help that day and lead a workshop. And I know that they were getting ready to eat lunch and they were going to say a blessing over the meal. And the millennial had his ball cap on, and the boomer was thought that was irreverent and disrespectful and
Yep.
made that very clear in front of a large group of people.
Ooh.
And he said it and the room got quiet and I saw tears pour from this young millennial's face. And so as we started talking through what happened, a lot of frustration started coming out. But as the story went on, what we quickly realized is when you look back again and understand someone's story, this young guy had no idea of this cultural norm and wasn't trying to be disrespectful. But why it hurt him so deeply is that he was actually prematurely balding. And so that ball cap was covering an insecurity, and that insecurity had been exposed in front of everyone. What happened after that was then the boomer crying because he realized, wow, I made false assumptions based on what I thought you should know because I know that. I've embarrassed you in front of a group and I apologize. So then seeing the humility of a leader apologize, and it opened up so much communication that spread, Raquel, because the bottom line is so much of the conflict that's happening, it's not intentional, actually. I don't believe. In fact, I think we're having a lot of friction over things that are coming from a good intent. But when our backgrounds and styles come from a variety of things, naturally they're going to potentially collide, even when everyone means well. So what we do with that collision, whether it's used to stuff down or to manipulate or to call, to be kind of deconstructive, or whether we use it constructively to propel creativity and to catalyze progress, it is up to us. So what I saw happen that day at the camp was not only between two people who had a misunderstanding, but that rippled and created collective understanding, which led into such a better culture for their group.
I bet you they got along, at least able to communicate after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's powerful to see. And I shared that story because the most intense conflicts I see come from really deep issues within the person, right? Something that is very deep to them. And when that feels threatened, we can, we'll go into the limbic system of our brain, that fight or flight. And from there, what we do with it is really critical.
So I want to get into that a little bit more here. So from what you've seen and understand, what is the way that people traditionally respond when they get into an argument or they're kind of rubbed the wrong way by something? And do you have some examples then of how that works? What seems to be the go-to reaction?
Yeah, and this is if you do react or respond in this way, I want to say first and foremost, congratulations, you're human. Very naturally, when we and my 11-year-old son calls this when we're triggered, right? Someone says or does something that rubs us in, I'm talking like every kind of wrong way, that what happens is that trigger goes to the emotional center of our brain. This is the limbic system, and it's not a great way to operate out of. So we are flaring. Some of us fight, some of us flight, some of us freeze, but the blood goes out to our limbs, and because we're ready to fight or flight or to respond. We're feeling threatened, we're feeling danger, and so we're operating out of a highly emotional state. Now, physiologically, this could take so many different forms. Like, I'm curious with you, have you ever had a moment that you've it has kind of flared you up? Someone has said or done something.
Yes. Yep. I've been there. I think everyone has.
Yeah. What do you notice, or what have you noticed about like your body when that happens?
Everything gets tense, and I really do feel like the reasoning in my brain shuts off. Like, I'm mad, and I want to get my point across, and it's almost like I don't care what you say because I don't agree with it, and I'm not even giving you the time of day. It's like instant reflex.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You are a fighter, my friend. I'm a freezer. I just, what do I do? So what happens is typically we tighten. Some of us get red. We feel the blood rushing to our head. We can clench our jaws. Some of us just say what we want to say. Instinctively, we want to react and respond. But what I'm suggesting, and the model we'll learn today, is that instead of going, and some call it rat brain, down that place, that we're going to pause before we react or respond. We're going to ask some questions, and we're going to replace that quick judgment with, hey, maybe there's a reason that they said or did this, and could I understand? So we're going to be benefit of the doubt givers versus quick reactors.
That is such an important thing, and it takes training. So you have a 4-step process for dealing with these differences. It's supposed to help people come together despite arguing with each other. How did you come across these 4 steps? How did you come up with this system?
Yeah, listening, learning, a ton of research, a ton of time with clients. So again, I started out in the generational world, and when we think about conflict, oh, there's plenty to go around there, and so it's great. We have focused a lot on diversity. I feel like in our culture in general, which is good. It's very important to understand the things that make us unique, so we can relate to, respect, and honor others. What we're missing is how do we then move to inclusion and start bringing all these different things together? We're going to celebrate them, and it's all good and fair until you come in and do it a different way than I do it, you know? And then this is when we're starting to have problems. So for the past 10 years, I've been working on solutions to that, and I've come up with, I mean, it's a simplified model based on research, brain research, pre-existing things that we can retrain ourselves. Think of it much like a marathon. You don't just show up the race morning like, okay, lace up my
And run it.
shoes.
No
Yeah, girl,
way.
give me that medal. No, you're going to train for it. There is a very specified training plan. And I'm suggesting there is a way that we can train and or retrain our brain to how we encounter differences so that it can be used to calm and to create positive breakthroughs that benefit all.
Okay, so what is the first step in that process then? And can you give me an example of how, as we go through these steps, even like how what they are and how they can be used?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say this is a situational model. So let's say that you get an email this morning or this afternoon. You're like, what? I mean, I'm talking to you, or you're hot, you're warm, you're pacing, or maybe you get on social media and like, oh, they did not just say that. So in those moments, rather than reacting or responding, texting, calling, in-person conversations, rather than kind of going into that frustrated zone, that we're going to pause.
Mhm.
We are going to take a deep breath and give our brain some space to process what's really going on below the surface. And so rather than coming up with all these stories, we're pretty good storytellers, right?
Mhm.
We once someone says or does something, did you know our brains are wired 5 times more for negativity than
Oh,
positivity?
that's interesting. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So very naturally, we're protective beings. So very naturally, if you do something, Raquel, that I remotely, that has, maybe it relates to my past, that I had a bad experience, I'm gonna be very careful with you. And then how we think impacts how we feel, which impacts how we behave. So we're
Mhm.
having a lot of ugly behaviors right now because we're having a lot of ugly thoughts. And so we're gonna stop by pausing. We're going to give ourselves some breathing room, and we're going to give some clarity to our thought process before we react or respond. I encourage listeners to ask questions and be curious rather than going to a quick judgment about how you interpret the situation. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this or that could happen. I encourage listeners to do what I call a pause audit. This is where you take time to just really pay attention to your thoughts. And so I would, when I was going through some health issues, I had a counselor who said, I quickly realized I was having issues with stress, because she had me do this thought audit to see if I had any toxic thoughts. I'm like, oh, that's a cute little counselor exercise. I'll do it because I'm a rule follower. And when I listened to my thoughts and journaled them for just a few days, I quickly realized I was having some bad thoughts with stress. So when stress would hit, it would trigger me and I'm all flared. And that was causing me stress. And that long term overtime stress was impacting my health. So when we do this exercise, we're saying, how is our thought life, particularly as it comes to self and others, and are any thoughts consistently emerging, becoming a pattern that could be detrimental to self and others? And identifying that is huge. So when we pause, we're giving ourselves some space to process this in a non emotional state so we can use that logic center a little better. I want to share, I love this quote by Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. It
Okay.
says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. So there's great power in pausing. And oh gosh, I get excited thinking about what would happen if we all tapped into that pause power.
It makes total sense. It gives you a chance to just take that minute. There's so many instances where just taking a minute to breathe is a good thing, and this is another great example of that. So The second step you outline, it's called filter. What is that about? What does it look like?
Oh, this is the hardest. So after we pause and give our brain some space to process clearly, we're going to check our filter, and it's our lens for seeing the world. We're going to look at our paradigm. Now, do you know what a paradigm is, Raquel?
Roughly, but how about you give us your explanation?
Yeah, it's like think of it like a good old pair of glasses. It impacts the way that we see everything. It's constructed from our background. So it could be our family of origin, the region of the country that we lived in, our personality, our generation, our race, our gender, um, our past hurts, insecurities. Oh man, hardships that have come. All of those things began to come together to form a filter for which we began to see and process the world. Now, what I find fascinating about that is, do you wear contacts or glasses at all?
I do. I do wear glasses. I have them right here. I'm just not wearing them because the light shows through on my lenses.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm a contact glasses girl myself. And annually, what do we do every year to make sure that we can get our prescription renewed?
Got to go to the eye doctor.
Yeah, girl, we go to that eye doctor. And that's what I'm challenging us to do with our paradigm is to check on it from time to time, to see, hey, are things accurate? Is my prescription still up to date? Or over time, have things become a little fuzzy? Have I put up, am I seeing myself clearly? Am I seeing others clearly? Or is there a little fuzzy that's come over time? Also, in that time, we want to check for what's called a bias. And a bias is simply a favor for or against something or someone or a group of people. And so in the world of bias, there's two types: unconscious, which simply means we don't even know we're doing it, and conscious bias means, hey, we know that we have this bias and we're choosing it. And so unconscious bias is fascinating because we all have it. It's impacting the way that we see everything. And it's fascinating because we're exposed to as many as 11 million pieces of information at any one time.
Wow.
I mean,
That's a
think
lot.
about that. I mean, even looking around your space and mine, but I've got lights, I've got documents, water, dark chocolate, of course, pens, clothes. I mean, you name it. I've got a lot going on in this space. And without unconscious bias, see, our brains can only process 40. So unconscious bias helps us take all of these things that are going on around us and focus them down on the things we need to do to function. So an example would be, have you ever been in the market for a car?
Yes. Actually, just did that this summer. It's one more thing.
I mean, you did not mess around on the milestones,
No.
So did you see that car like before you bought it everywhere you went? Like, oh,
Yes.
Yes. My sister even got the car that I wanted. So I saw it all the time.
all the time, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm a beetle bug girl. I love those beetle bugs. And when I was in the market for one, I mean, it was just like they were everywhere, everywhere. Well, I'm sure they were always there, but unconscious bias was I was kind of focusing in on that. And so it's not a bad thing. It's a thing that helps us kind of achieve and be aware. It can become harmful when we start saying only that beetle bug convertible is the only way to go. And so we just want to be aware of our biases and anything that could hinder us from seeing clearly. When we're checking our filter, it's a lot like I once heard someone say, think of it like a coin. And a coin is so tiny and so small, but if you put that in the sun, compare it to the sun, which is so large and bright, but if you put
Mhm.
that quarter over your eye and look up to the sun, that very small coin can block your entire view of the sun. So when we're checking our filter, Raquel, we're simply saying, is there any or are there any coins that are hindering us or blocking us from seeing self and others in a clear, accurate, fair, and favorable light?
That's a really great. I like that analogy so much. And so I feel like people don't often look at themselves and their backgrounds, and it's hard to do because you don't. A lot of it, I feel like you don't realize. So how big of a role does it play when it comes to seeing eye to eye with somebody, and how can you check yourself to make sure that you are aware of those biases because it can be really hard to even know you have them.
Ding, ding, ding. Lots of dings. All the dings. Yeah, absolutely. I would say actually lack of self-awareness and or discipline or courage, I would say, to check our own views is probably one of the number one causes I'm seeing because it's so much easier to say, right, but like, it's Raquel did this, and I don't like that about her. But often the things we get frustrated about others, guess what? They're often the very things we dislike about our own self. So there's this thing called a kind of a mirroring effect. It's like looking in the mirror. I mean, we're actually processing others through our own lens of self. Like when you think about it, we're pretty selfish people, like a lot of it comes down to ourselves. But the challenge becomes, how do we check ourself? And
Mhm.
I'm telling you, it takes serious courage and bravery. So some ideas to do that. Again, back to your thoughts. And I want you to think about, are there any negative, repetitive thoughts towards anyone, any group, any situation? And are they warranted? So to do some really hard checks in your thought process. The second is, if you have what I call a safe person, this could be a friend, a colleague, a mentor, a family member, to say, I'm really checking myself. I want to make sure that all is good in the way that I'm seeing. Um, have you noticed that I say anything, consistently about someone or a different group? Could you give me feedback on how you see my site? And the third is, once biases do begin to emerge, by the way, they will for everyone if we're honest. Okay, what can we do to kind of bias bust? You can read things on people or different situations that are different than you, can hang out with people who are different. And so it's really neat. What the research shows is, once we see one person representing that group differently in a positive light, we begin to see the entire group in a positive light. So what's fascinating is, if we get our personal mind sights, and as I call them, like lens right or filter right, and then we see others right, and then that ripples larger, do you begin to see how massive change can happen if we get our eyesight right?
And not to mention, you can be influencing others in the process.
Oh, it's ripple, right? It
Mhm.
just takes bravery and courage to do.
I can definitely vouch for that, asking somebody. I've done that myself. That is such an interesting thing when you actually do that and you get somebody else's opinion on how you're seeing something. It can definitely open your eyes. So that is a great step.
Yeah,
Um,
and I commend you for that, to go in and, with all this, it comes down to the heart for me. Like, so when you received, I'm guessing the people who gave you feedback, and maybe it was some good old, the best is constructive, right? If we're
yeah.
ready for it, when it comes from a loving person who cares about you. So when we think about that, know that feedback, when we get it, is a gift, even if it's challenging and hard to hear. But if you
Mhm.
know it's coming from someone who cares about you and has your best interest in mind, I want to encourage us all to be women who are brave to receive that type of feedback, because it could be the very thing that propels us to the next level. And also to be women who care and have enough heart, so that when we then share it with others, they know it's coming from a place of great care for them as a person.
Moving on to our third step in your 4-step process, what are people stepping back to do? Because step back is the third step. How does it work?
Oh, I love this one. This gets really fun. Okay, so we've encountered a situation that's flared us. We've paused, given our brain some space to process it. We've checked our filter and said, why am I seeing the situation the way that I am? Is there anything that's prohibiting me from seeing clearly? Now we're going to step back and say, hmm, are there other ways of seeing the same situation? And if so, are they bad or wrong, or are they just different? And how could that other perspective actually shine brand new light on this area? So when we are stepping back, we're taking perspective. Some call it perspective taking. We are really going kind of from left brain to right brain to imagine what it may be like to grow up in a certain time period in this background and family and part of the country. Okay, then I could see how when you come into a room, you may expect the dress code to be this way, the communication to go that way, why you may perceive things the way that you do. So when we're stepping back, we're considering alternative views of the same situation. We are not assuming, we're going to ask. Listen. You can talk about listening all day if you'd like, the different types of listening. I believe, if we say nothing else on this podcast, I believe a movement of listening could change our world. Because when we listen and seek to understand someone, and when we hear their story, and by the way, story unites the brains between the storyteller and the listener, making it a tried and true and pure form of communication that can bridge so many divides. If we were to do nothing else but to story share with the heart of listening, we're going to increase so much understanding and empathy, which then gives us space for engagement. So this is the process where you hear it said a lot, like just walk in someone else's shoes. And I love that
Mhm.
phrase, but it's impossible to do. It requires great imagination. So be creative. Ways that I get teams to do this is we'll actually do improv. Like I'll give a team a situation that's completely outside of their experience and they begin to act it out. So I may say to you, Raquel, what was it like to be the first man on the moon? And then you have to come in and respond as if you're Neil Armstrong, which in a time period, a different gender. And I'm guessing you've
Mhm.
never been to the moon.
Never been to the moon, never been a man. Can't say I've done either of those things.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you are now placed in this position and beginning, your wheels are turning to think, oh, well, how would I be if that were? And so there's all kinds of creative ways that we can do this. But this is where, have you ever been walked into a meeting or gone to a conference and you walk out like, best conference I've ever been to. Oh, I just loved that meeting. And your colleague is like, what was that? I mean, oh, that was horrible. Like,
Yeah.
same event,
Two
same
separate perceptions. Yep.
totally different perspectives, right? So when we're
Mhm.
perspective taking, we're listening and seeking to understand that other point of view.
And then adapting is your final step. What does that entail?
So this is where we begin to put all of the perspectives together. And so this is where we move kind of from the diverse thoughts to inclusion and how that can drive innovation. And so when we start putting different thoughts together, or perspectives or viewpoints, it can be super easy sometimes. So 3 strategies. The first is to build on commonalities. This is the easiest. This is used in peace talks. If you can have leaders from countries with totally different views of how we're going to get to an end result, but they can both agree that we want to leave the world a better place for our grandkids. So they start the conversation not on the issue, on their grandkids and build out from there. So a wonderful exercise to use with your team, your family, is to get a different group of people together and say, what all do we have in common? Strip out all the predictable stuff and I give groups about 4 minutes to do it. It's awkward at first, like, and then over time, well, I like eating cake. Well, me too. I love chocolate, girl. And before you know it, then I've got to walk because I eat so much chocolate. I walk too. All of these things start coming together that form very strong relationships. And I've seen this with so many companies build out little groups of pockets of Taco Tuesday eaters, all of these things. So build on commonalities. The second is yes and thinking. So rather than saying, yes, I like your idea, Raquel, but I would prefer to go with mine. We're saying, yes, I really hear you and I appreciate you, Raquel. And have you considered this point of view? So build on commonalities, think yes and thinking, how we can combine all of our perspectives rather than just choosing one. And the third is what's called third alternative. This is an awesome Covey technique and a great book to read, where first alternative is my way, second alternative is your way, and third alternative is a higher way. And this is where we create breakthrough new realities. And it takes us simply saying, man, I'm very much staunchly in this view, and you're very much stuck in this view. Well, we're going to say, is there a higher way that can transcend both of our individual views? And if so, what would that look like? And we get in a room or a virtual room and sky's the limit with ideas. And then we start big and then get small and we achieve what's called synergy, where 1 + 1 starts to equal 1,000 because of this compounding impact that comes.
That is so interesting and so many ways it can be used. I mean, I'm thinking of like a partner with a spouse, but at work and with friends and just, oh my goodness, it could be used everywhere.
Yes, and it kind of ingrains in your mind, and it becomes an accountability that when you are flared, which by the way, it'll probably happen this afternoon if it hasn't already happened, that you're going to get this new operating model in your mind. It's going to be convicting and it's going to be challenging, but I promise if you use it, if you pause, check your filter, step back and consider those other views, and then look at how you can put all the views together for mutually beneficial outcomes.
Mhm.
It's going to change your relationships. It's going to free your mind. It's going to change your life. It's going to ripple to the workplace, the community, the world. And I think we could have tremendous breakthrough if we started practicing this.
And that is the point, right? Takes a lot of very conscious effort to do this. How does someone get started in this and catch themselves? Like catch themselves before they react to actually backtrack and start this process.
Yeah, it's like a new behavior, right?
It
And
is.
so, a simple behavior model. I just read a great book called the Coaching Effect. I think I'll find it in just a minute, but it talks about what's going to happen is y- you've got this new model. Okay, I'm going to pause, filter check, step back, and adapt. It's
Mhm.
not going to happen overnight. You're not going to have a heated situation. You're like, oh, here it is. I'm going to pause. You know, it's going to happen, and you may like word vomit, or you may react or respond. You may say something you regret, but then you're going to remember, oh wait, what would have happened if I would have paused? And then you're going to get another opportunity to practice it and celebrate the wins when you do it. I mean, celebrate, because what celebrates gets repeated. And then when you mess up, be graceful to yourself. We all do. So what could you do better in the future? Now I want to share, I poll the groups that I work with, and we look at moments where they've reacted in the heat of the moment and the outcome. I'm telling you, I've probably done this hundreds of times, and I've never seen a positive outcome come out of reacting in the heat of the moment. I ask groups, have you ever paused before reacting or responding? And what is that outcome? The correlation to either a neutral or positive outcome is usually about 90%.
Wow.
So once you start seeing the value of practicing this, so it's kind of like, if you're on a weight loss plan and you finally lose a pound, you're like, oh, well, good, I can lose 2 pounds. Oh my gosh. It's that excitement is going to come from the relationships that don't go into conflict, the peace you have internally, and the results that you begin to see.
So, how have you seen this process? Can you give me an example of, you said you talked to some people and they give you examples even of how they've done this and what the outcome was? You gave us an example earlier of a fight that happened between two different people in two different generations and the outcome of that. So, what is an example of situation where this process was used and was the outcome different?
Yeah, I'd love to share a personal story because I believe with all of this, it starts with them. By the way, if we want to change the world, and I think we're all in that kind of movement, it doesn't start with me saying, what are you going to do? It starts with me saying, what am I going to do? And so I had the awesome opportunity to practice what I preach. It's a lot easier just to talk about it than to live it out, you know? And so 2 years ago, I was commissioned to go to be a speaker for a major athletic conference. So I had 10 events working with Gen Z student athletes, helping them prepare for life and work after college. And so I was excited I got the job, but honestly, a little bit nervous because that's not usually the target audience I speak to. Now, I can tell you every stat, I can teach you to do it well, but knowing something and being able to do it well is different. So I was very nervous, and I prepared more than I've ever prepared. And so my first event was I believe it was in Baltimore. So I got up, and I'm talking hundreds of student athletes in the group, bright light on me. And I'm about 30 minutes into a 1 hour keynote when every speaker's worst nightmare happened. Oh, like I didn't just lose one or two of the audience members, like I lost the entire crowd. And
Ooh.
it was like bad.
That's rough. Yeah.
It was rough. Have you ever had, Raquel, one of those outer body experiences where you are just like, you don't even know what's happening next?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm like sweating in places I didn't know I could sweat. I feel like I'm not connected to my arms. I'm talking in slow motion. I
Yep.
don't know what came out of my mouth. I just know I finished it, smiled, walked out, and I found myself alone in a McDonald's drive-through with an ice cream cone thinking, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm just tough on myself. So I went back to the next day. I'm at the airport, about to head home, and I got an email from the client, and it said in the subject line, "How did you think last night went?" Question mark. Oh, if you're probably getting a good feel for my personality, I work so hard to understand an audience and how to deliver a message in a meaningful way. I do interviews. I do everything I can to do a good job.
Mhm.
And I was heartbroken because I thought, oh no, I did not meet the standard. And so I called the client. So I think let's talk. So I called the client, and she said, first, Jessica, I want to let you know everyone loved you as a person. And I was
Well,
like,
that's good. Yeah.
I've heard this before. Are we breaking up? No. And she said, but ultimately, the students didn't feel like there was enough interaction. Raquel, I don't know what happened to me in that moment. Well, I do. I went into limbic system. For some reason, in that moment, I was triggered. And what I wanted to say is, oh, did they? This is all in my head. Luckily, it didn't come out of my mouth. I said, did they? Because when I was in college, we just listened when a speaker came in. We didn't need, edutainment and all these things. We just listened. But
Yeah.
all I could see in my head is this I'll send you the graphic of it. I have a graphic of the pause, filter, check, step back, and adapt. All I could see was that little darn chart. And I'm like, oh no, this is my moment to pause. And in my head, I'm going through it real quickly, where I immediately got stuck and where I saw my major hangup was in the filter check, because I was insecure that I could deliver what they needed in a way that these young student athletes could hear and understand. I tried my best. I got up in front of hundreds in a very vulnerable situation, and it didn't go well. Have you guys, or I'd ask the audience, a group, or you, if you've ever done something vulnerable, and put yourself out there and it didn't go well? And, I got to do that on the stage. And so I realized it was my insecurity, because when I perspective take or step back, I realize the next generation learns and thinks so differently. In fact, if I were to teach in my style, I would slow down their learning and development. And when I began to think about adapting, if I really care about the message I share, I got to figure out how to do it in new and relevant ways. So I asked the client, could we put together a think tank and learn how to do this better? We put together student athletes, professors. We all came together, looked at the content, got feedback. It's great content. Let's just tweak it, try it. I get back out there. In the first event I did, I had a young college athlete come up and say, gosh, Jessica, that wasn't even boring. I thought, woohoo. I mean, this is progress. But then what happened after that was amazing. Each one got better and stronger. Next thing you know, these things are selling out. We had so many, thousands coming out. We couldn't even house them in one place. We had to do multiple events. But the coolest story, and I'll close with this, was I was in Staten Island, New York, and one of the student athletes, one of the things he was not prepared for was that after college, you often have to wear a tie, particularly in Manhattan. And he didn't know how to tie a tie or where to get a nice one. So he partnered as a part of our session with professors at the school, at this university. They donated their ties to these young men who were getting ready to graduate. And even better, would you believe they came to our session and taught these young men how to tie ties?
Oh, that's awesome.
It was their elders. And so I think in that moment, what if I had just let that initial reaction be what it was? I would have been in the way, my own self in the way of breakthrough for these young student athletes. So back to your original point, I believe the real unlocker underneath all this, the hinge to change everything, begins within each one of us.
You teach and speak, as you just mentioned, and you have a website and you have so much stuff out there. So I'm going to let you tell me more. How can people learn more about this, or if they want to bring you in to help coach them, what do they do?
Oh my gosh, please email me. Look at the website, can get a good feel. It's jessicastollings-holder.com. You can email me directly at j@jessicastollings-holder.com. I just launched a new coaching line called the Paradigm Prescription, where we get at the root of kind of understanding our views of diversity and inclusion and how they can be prosperous for all, and how we can communicate so everyone can hear and understand, create a culture of belonging, and ultimately transfer knowledge and wisdom so that we can thrive today and well into the future. So it would be a pleasure to just learn and hear where these different women and their organizations are and how we could come together to make tremendous impact.
And as always, I will have those links in the description of the podcast so people can get a hold of you, because it's totally worth it. So they should. Thank you so much, Jessica. This has been a great conversation. It's been a great learning opportunity. So thank you for being here today.
Raquel, is always awesome. Thank you for your incredible questions and for a great conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening. And if you want to hear more Soul Source, subscribe to the show. We're available wherever you listen to podcasts. And if there's something you want us to talk about, we can do that too. We have a page. It's on Facebook. It's called the Soul Source Society. And it's where we interact with listeners. We get content ideas for future shows. We talk about past content. And overall, we just have a lot of fun. That's Soul Source Society on Facebook. We hope to see you there. Soul Source is brought to you by Red Shoes Inc., a leading agency that specializes in crisis and strategic communications, media relations, social media, and so much more. To learn more about Soul Source and Red Shoes, visit us at redshoesinc.com.